Hi, my name is Rachel and welcome to the Art Crew. Today I am going to be going over the wet on dry method and how to use it with acrylic paints to create layering, blending, and glazing. So let's get started. So what is the wet on dry method? Well, it's when we apply wet paint onto a dry surface. Think of this as your first brush stroke, or maybe it's your second or third or fourth layer of paint. It could be when you're adding details or simply when you are fixing a mistake. That's the basics of the wet on dry method, but there are two ways in which we use it that are less obvious, and that's with blending and glazing. So let's talk about blending first. When you blend using the wet on dry method, you are going to have three options to do so. The first is with a dry brush, the second is with a wet brush, and the third option is to use acrylic medium. Now I'm going to show all three here, and I'm going to start by using a dry brush. Typically I do this on a second or third coat. For our purposes, I'm doing it on a blank canvas. So here I have a 100% dry brush. It could be 90%. It doesn't have to be 100%. And with very light feather brush strokes, I am going to slowly spread apart the pigment across my canvas. This is what's going to give us that illusion that it's getting lighter. And this is really great for contained areas or areas that have really subtle shifting. It also is the most blurred of the three methods when using the wet on dry technique. So I highly recommend this one. I use this one a lot, pretty much towards the end of a painting. Now our next one is going to be the same wet on dry method, but we are using a wet brush. And the thing about using water is it can be our enemy and it can be our friend. So you want to be very careful with how much water you end up using on your brush. I will get my brush wet and then I'll actually dry it off with a paper towel and check it with my fingers to make sure that the brush isn't dripping wet. And then just like before, I'm going to slowly spread out the pigments, but this time you're going to see that they're going to travel a lot further and we're going to get more of a value shift from dark to light. This is a really great way of blending when you're doing a second coat. However, it can get streaky. To fix this, all you have to do is dry your paintbrush off on your paper towel and go back over your area. Now, last but certainly not least is acrylic medium. Acrylic medium keeps the integrity of acrylic paint, and it comes in a variety of different styles, from runny to thick to gloss to satin to all kinds of different matte mediums. And it is an excellent way to blend out, although it's not my favorite, so I don't use it as often as I probably should. Here I have some slow dry medium and I have regular gloss medium. I'm going to use the gloss because it's the same texture as the paint I'm working with. And just like before, I am going to coat my paintbrush with the medium. And then I'm going to start to drag across the edge that I'm trying to blend. And I'm going to go out as far as I want to go. And I'm going to work back and forth. It can also get streaky, so you can use the same method as the wet brush and just dry it off with a paper towel and go back over it. Here I'm just going to go back and forth until I'm pretty satisfied with it. And this is a great way to get yourself all blended. So again, that is us using a dry brush first, then we have a wet brush, and finally acrylic medium. Now what I'm going to do here is I am going to go ahead and blend out using a dry brush, then I'm going to switch to a wet brush, and then when I get to the shadow section, I am going to do this with acrylic medium. A bit about acrylic medium that I don't particularly like when blending is the pigments can push to the edge of the brush, which can make it a little frustrating. I like acrylic medium for glazing way more than I like it for blending, which we'll talk about here in a second. Now, if you are curious about other tips of acrylic paints, or you would like to do this sphere activity, I do have a free guidebook down in the description. Feel free to download it. It does go over the materials I use along with this exercise and some other tips and tricks. Download it if you want, but you don't have to if you don't want to. So glazing is actually a method in which we're going to apply a transparent layer of paint over the top of almost finished painting to shift something, whether we're shifting the color or the value. Here I'm going to shift the color, and I'm going to do it pretty dramatically so you can see what I'm talking about. And I just loosened up my paint with some water. Now we have to be careful about water because it can break down the binder too much with our acrylic paints, which can cause some longevity issues with the pigment kind of falling off. I know some people say that it can cause cracking. I haven't had that issue, and an easy way to help protect the pigment is actually to put a varnish over the top of your painting when you're finished. So I try not to worry too much about it, especially if you like blending with water. Now for glazes, I don't actually like blending with water too much because it can get a little patchy, but it does do the job just as well. And now for glazing with color, I'm just going to scoop a little bit of color, and then I'm going to do about 50-50, 50% color, 50% medium. I'm going to mix the two together to make it transparent, and then I am going to paint that over my sphere. The reason why I like medium when it comes to glazing is it's the same texture as paint, but it also doesn't dry as fast, so I don't get too many patches when I have to go over and fix an area or spread it out more. It tends to be more uniform, and that's what I really like about it. And you can glaze, like I said, not just with color. Sometimes I do this when I need to push mountains into the background by mixing a sky color glaze or white to push things further back. Like I said, glazing's a lot of fun. I don't do it with every painting, but it can be an excellent practice to go and explore. So now you know the many uses of the wet on dry method when working with acrylic paints. Whether you're just adding a new layer of paint or you are doing some more detailed blending, all the way to glazing with acrylic medium. Now, I always preface that practice makes perfect. However, if you do have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below, and I will get back to them as quickly as possible. Thank you guys so much for watching. Happy painting, and I'll see you next time.